What's going on, guys? PokemonRadar here. Welcome back to the podcast. I've got some exciting news. We're changing the name. And the name is Collectors with Cards Drinking Coffee. I got to pull up my coffee cup here for you. Hope you guys can grab a nice cup of Joe and join me today here this morning, Monday morning. As you may be aware, I'm getting consistent finally with my YouTube stuff. So we're going to be dropping a new podcast every Monday. And today I wanted to kind of show this off with a very special guest. I mean, all my guests are special, but this guy is going to be, I think, very, very important in helping us understand modern Pokemon and kind of the business aspect of what's happening right now. So I would like to introduce our first guest on the newly named podcast, Shaun, or Squeaks, as we all know him by.
Hey man, how you doing, buddy?
Great. How are you?
I'm hanging in. It's a busy time of the year. We've got Champions Path coming out, then we've got Vivid Voltage coming out and tons of other releases. So it's a crazy time of the year, but I'm excited to be here, take a little bit of a break, chill, and just talk some Pokemon.
Great, fantastic. Well, I've been I've been holding myself back in our Discord voice a little bit because I wanted to be more excited talking to you, learning things about you before. I didn't want to get redundant like a week beforehand. So I want to dive in first and get to know you a little bit better before we start talking the market and Champions Path and all that, because I was out this morning doing some pre-orders from my local stores. But so how I like to start is just basically what was it like for you in 1999? You are a Midwest boy like myself, just a state south of me. But what was it for you? What brought you back? Was it what brought you into it? Was it the video game? Was it the card game? Was it the anime?
So for me, it was kind of everything. I grew up in a small town in Indiana, and at the time, I started to hear rumblings at school, people talking about Pokemon, that kind of thing. I lived way out in the country, so we didn't have cable or anything like that. And so I remember somebody told me that you could watch Pokemon on, I think it was the WB channel at the time. And so I went home and we had one of those antennas that you like adjusted it and it cranked around and so I'm doing that and I'm trying to like get 25, that was the channel number to come in, and I could barely get it. We're talking like the old fuzzy black and white screen and it's like going in and out, but I got it just enough that I would sit and I could watch Pokemon. You could hear it, but you could barely see it. And that to me was good enough. That hooked me. I was able to go to school and talk to friends about it. And then the big entry point for me was going to the mall. My mom would take me to the mall and, seeing cards there and kind of that experience of like, oh, everyone at school has cards. So I wanted to get some cards. And I got some cards, and then
base set. I'm assuming.
What was that?
Base set. I'm assuming.
Yes, base set. And so from that point forward, I got a few base set cards, kind of just a starter deck. I think it was the Machamp starter deck, and then I got a few packs. And I don't even remember what I pulled out of those, but it probably wasn't great if I don't remember it. And it was a situation then where my mom saw that I was really taking an interest into this and reading my cards and studying, and she could never get me to read. So the fact that I'm reading anything was a big deal. And we had a little local game store in our town, and so she took me in there one day, and the owner of the store was in there, and he started talking to my mom and kind of said, well, bring him in on our New Year's Eve bash thing that we're doing and, see if he likes it. Right. And so she brought me back that night. It was New Year's Eve. They had a big party, pizza and everything. The ball was getting ready to drop. And I walk in, and the first thing I see are two people. They were having like a tournament, and two people were sitting there. And the first guy I can see there right at the front table was playing with Blastoise, right? First edition. It was first edition Blastoise. Like back then, people used to play with those cards. They're all unsleeved across the table. And I see that, and I'm hooked, man. I'm like, I've got to be here. These people have the cool cards, the good cards, the stuff I want. And so from that moment forward, I remember that. I don't remember a lot. Like I always remember like bits and pieces growing up, but that night, man, I remember that vividly. That was huge for me. You've got pizza and cards, two of my favorite things. And so from that point forward, I was hooked. So it was pretty much everything: TV show, card game, movies, all of it.
So are you an only child? Did you have brothers or sisters doing this with you?
I do have a sister. She's older than me. Okay. And growing up, she wasn't really super into Pokemon. I do remember a time that we went to a Walmart and she we like collectively worked together. Like, our parents didn't really get us, too much stuff growing up unless it was like a holiday or something.
Hmm.
But one of the things was, sometimes we would spat. And so we decided we're gonna get along today and try to convince our, mom to get us some packs, right? Because she'll be so like happy we're getting along. So we did that, and we each got a few packs. And I actually pulled a Charizard in my packs. It was the only one I've ever pulled. I was screaming in the back seat. My mom like slammed on her brakes thinking something was wrong. And then my sister did not pull a Charizard. She pulled a Gyarados and a Magneton. But that wasn't Charizard. And so from that point forward, she pretty much lost all interest in Pokemon because I got the Charizard she did. So that was it.
That's unfortunate. I think I was probably just as excited to get a Gyarados or something like that back then because it was just, they were all just so cool. But
no, absolutely.
Yeah. So with the video game, were you a red, blue version, yellow version? What was
so
your
I
exposure
originally
there?
had blue.
Okay.
It was just, so I had back then Nintendo Power. And so I saw Pokemon in that, and I didn't really know, which one meant which, and I was always more of a fan of Charizard than Blastoise,
Hmm.
but it was just one of those like, Mom, I need Pokemon, Mom, I need Pokemon. And because Mom was always the one you go to. Dad was more the like, firm, like if it's not your birthday or it's not Christmas, you don't need it kind of thing. And
Hmm.
so my mom, was always the one that I would kind of, well, Mom, everyone at school's playing this game, I need it. So she went out eventually and got me Pokemon, and she had just grabbed blue. So blue was the one I started on, but I eventually did get red. But I was a Charmander kid, so I did
Okay.
grab Charmander as my starter.
All right, very good. Yeah, I think we all did. So,
Yeah.
there's the select few, but yeah,
Yeah.
they started with Charmander and then did the other two maybe in like their second or third try around the game.
Exactly.
They're liars. So would you consider yourself like were you like a huge nerd back in the day? Like this is like what you were doing. It wasn't just Pokemon. You were getting into other stuff too. Like
Everything.
Okay.
It was video games, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh for a while, Pogs,
Mhm.
I'm really dating myself here, but all any of those, kind of hype train things,
You
I
hopped
was
on.
in on that. But yeah, I was definitely classified, as a nerd. I played some sports in school like soccer and things like that. I was never fantastic at them. I was always the one on the team that was more the nerdy one that was just for some reason playing sports, and they would make sure that I knew that. So
How old are you?
so this would have how old am I right now?
Yeah.
I just turned 30.
Okay,
So
very cool. All right, I'm 27, so a couple of
pretty
years
close.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that ideal spot seems to be like 32, 33 from what we see from the other big time collectors.
Yeah.
So since you kind of consider yourself that nerd all the way through, did you ever stop collecting Pokemon, or was it
I did.
okay?
So I remember the last product I bought was the local game store that I was in went out of business, and another store replaced it.
Mm-hmm.
And it was more of like an ice cream shop, and they just had some card stuff left over, I think, kind of trying to keep people coming in the store from the store that was there prior.
Mm-hmm.
But it was right when Legendary Collection came out, and they
Oh.
had the starter deck. So the actual set hadn't come out yet, and I bought one of the Charizard starter decks. And for me, when my first Charizard I ever got, I traded probably way too much at the time for it. It was one of those situations where the guy that had it, I just kept throwing foils on the pile, trying to convince him, to trade me. And then I go out and buy this deck, and it has the non-hollow in it. And I'm just thinking, I traded all that stuff. I worked so hard to get my Charizard. Now they're just giving them out to everybody. And
Mhm.
so that, that didn't settle well with younger me. And at that point, I kind of just lost interest in it, which is crazy because that set now today is my favorite set.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I
but
don't
yeah.
hear that too often. That's
Legendary Collection
Yeah.
is absolutely. I love the firework reverse hollow. I think
Beautiful.
that's one of the most unique reverse foils they've ever done in the game. And I actually, I really, really like that set. The hollow's not as much, but
Yeah.
the actual like 110 in reverse hollow, I think that's like one of those things someday I would love to have them all like framed up and
Yeah.
on my wall or something. So
Yeah. And
yeah, that's
that-
the set that kind of led me out.
okay, and that name just like to me, Legendary Collection, and I don't know if they picked the best of the best out of the sets that they selected, but
Mhm.
just that that stigma of legendary. I really like the set. I know it's a third reprint or whatever, but yeah, I love that set too. It's nice to hear that from someone else.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so you made it through like the second gen, the Neo sets then, right?
Correct. Yeah, I remember
I'm
my
so
first
jealous of
pull.
that.
Yeah, my first pull ever was a Steelix. I never got any of the really crazy ones that, like the Shining Charizard or any of the Shinings, or not at least that I remember. I
Mhm.
remember having, I think it was Steelix and Ampharos were the two from Neo Genesis, because that's kind of what in my area at least you could find the most of.
Mhm.
I did have a Lugia that was Japanese,
Okay.
because you were a real cool kid if you had Japanese cards when everyone else had English,
Yeah.
and so I ended up getting a pack at the mall one time. My mom was there, and there was the little kiosk at the mall, and I managed to convince her to get me a pack, and I actually pulled a Lugia in it, which was a pretty huge
Wow.
deal at the time to have one. So
Yeah.
that's pretty much the foray that I remember with Neo.
It's a pretty big deal now too. I mean, no, yeah, I'm really jealous of that because I stopped at the gym sets,
Hmm.
and although like throughout middle school, high school, college, like there was that huge nerd just being pushed down from my persona. I was just hiding
Hmm.
it, and yeah, I hate that I missed out on that stuff because silver version was my favorite. Like playing that,
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah, Lugia was just this epic Pokemon to me. It was my favorite, it still is. So
I,
yeah,
I
that's
actually
something
love that you
I'm very jealous of
I,
that.
I love that you say that, because silver is actually my favorite as well.
Yeah,
So that's pretty awesome.
yeah, I still pull it up and play it every now and then.
Yeah.
I think I have a current game going on right now. I just finished catching the Shining Gyarados in
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And see,
Lake
that was a
Rage.
huge deal at the time.
Oh my
A
god,
shiny
massive!
like
Yeah, he's always on my team, no matter what. Always have the red Gyarados.
yeah.
It's just there's no questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so you stopped at Legendary Collection.
Mhm.
What was next for you? What did you get into?
So from there, I jumped into Yu-Gi-Oh! Was the big thing. That's kind of where everyone else at school had gravitated towards, was Yu-Gi-Oh! And then that fad lasted a much shorter time for most people. I think for me, I stuck with that pretty much through about middle school. And then in
Hmm.
middle school, I kind of faded away from that, and then just more oriented towards video games as a whole and just playing games. I had a GameCube in the early 2000s, then obviously a Wii in the
Hmm.
later 2000s, and so on and so forth. I'm a huge Nintendo fanboy. Um, but yeah, so I pretty much just, video games, and then, hanging out with friends and things like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I got into some other card games, all Wizards of the Coast stuff like Star Wars and MLB Showdown, Magic the
Hmm.
Gathering, Harry Potter. But Dragon Ball Z, that was Score. But
Yeah.
yeah, they didn't last very long at all. And yeah, I moved into video games playing Guitar Hero or
Hmm.
Grand Theft Auto and NBA 2K, but mostly. So yeah, all right, very cool. Because I know that, which we'll see on your website here, which I want to pull up briefly. Is that, or we'll do that in a little bit. The graded video games that you're getting into. So
Hmm.
um, I think that's an
Not the
interesting
one.
market.
Not the
Oh, that's a
spoilers.
big boy. Gosh,
Yeah.
um, I missed out on buying those, and I mean I'll probably end up getting them. But all right, so I guess coming into the new age of Pokemon collecting,
Hmm.
what brought you back, and like when? How long have you been doing this for?
So what brought me back initially was, it was 2010, and I was just kind of in a weird spot in my life. I had just exited a long-term relationship, and I was in college, and so I was more just kind of trying to find myself. And sometimes when you go through hardships and things like that, you kind of rebound back to maybe things that brought you enjoyment or comfort
Hmm.
previously in life. And one of those things was Pokemon. So one night, again, dating myself, I was in a Skype call with some friends, and we were just talking about growing up with Pokemon.
Hmm.
And one of the things that, we kind of got on that discussion is, they still make the cards and stuff. You still see them at the store. And this was right around the Heart Gold, Soul Silver, Black and White, eventual like Black and White era. And I started looking up decks just to like see, what kind of stuff was in the format. And one of the big decks people were talking about at the time was Lost Gar with Mew Prime and Gengar Prime.
Hmm.
And I looked at the Mew Prime card and was just like, this is amazing. And like, you go look at like base set cards, and then you look at something like Mew Prime, and it's just like, wow, they've come really far. So it's late at night, and there was a bus line that went from my the dorm area that I was in to the mall. And the mall had a late night Target. So I jumped on the bus, and I told him I'm gonna go buy some Pokemon cards. I'm just gonna do it. And I go and I get some packs, and the first 2 packs I open, swear on my life, were 2 triumphant packs, and I ripped back-to-back new primes, and I was hooked. That was
Wow.
it. That was game over. Like, now I know the odds of that happening is just so slim,
Hmm.
and the fact that it did happen, and from there, I wanted to I think the only other card I got out of all the packs was, like, a Ho-Oh Legend top, from Heart Gold Soul
Oh, I
Silver,
love
and
those.
from that point forward, I was like, "I wanna build decks, I wanna play again, I wanna collect," and so from there forward, then I started playing competitively, going to a local league,
Mm.
and then as I played competitively, I started to meet new people. I met a group of guys that they went by Team Hovercats in the competitive side of the game, and I was there. It was initially just 4 friends that grew up together, and then I was their first fifth member, and eventually that team grew to 50 plus people all
Oh,
across the
wow.
world. And we played the competitive game and traveled the country playing and everything. And then from there, it just got to the point that I like the vending side maybe a little more than the competitive side, and
Hmm.
so eventually I made that transition over, and that's a whole nother story. So
Which we're about to talk about. But yeah,
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
completely unfamiliar with like the competitive scene and actually
Mhm,
playing the game. I mean, we made up our own rules as kids, me and my brothers, on how to go about it. So we never really
mhm,
got into that. I never went to tournaments or anything, and
mhm.
so I wasn't getting those special cards that we all really really want now. But
Yeah, yeah.
so when did the business side get into it? Because we'll shout your name out real quick. You're Squeaks Gaming World, Game World.
Mhm,
Here's his website. Pull it up right here. I mean, you've got a lot of stuff. I mean, everything from high end to modern.
mhm.
Video games is coming soon. Excuse me. Video games
Yeah.
coming soon. But you're
We have them, they just have to go up.
right. I mean, I mean, you're a big shot. I mean, to me, when I would hop in E4 Discord, like there was a time where I was only doing it to listen to you because I was like trying to follow what you were doing. Because I value that. I mean, I pay $10 a month for SM Pratt's Patreon because I value what he's saying. So the fact that I could I could get it for free out of you for the modern stuff was totally worth it. So how long have you been doing? You're full time, right?
Mhm, I am full time, and I appreciate the kind words. I don't know that I necessarily consider myself big time, but I am pretty happy so far with the success I've found. So I started when I left college. I got a job at a publishing company, and I worked there for about 3 years, and it was a great job. It taught me a lot about working, in a work atmosphere, being professional, customer service and all of that,
Hmm.
because I was kind of the liaison with authors in the process of like actually having their books published. So I kind of worked with them on, mediating between the stuff they were submitting versus, the printing process and all of that, and getting their actual book out to print. So from there, though, it was a situation where, I was traveling around on the weekends and hanging out with friends and playing cards and everything. And, as many people do, maybe you don't know since you haven't played the competitive side, but a lot of people will flip cards as they go just to be able to build the newest decks and that kind of thing and go along. Because, sometimes it can get expensive to have to change decks all the time if you're wanting to play, whatever the number one meta deck is. And so as I was doing that, I started to get more serious about my finances. And I actually went through and, really made a hardcore budget and figured out, how much I'm, making at my job and how much I'm making doing this. And I actually realized it was pretty close in terms of, what I was making after taxes flipping cards versus, my actual job. And that's when I realized, what if I just did this full time? I not that I didn't like my other job, but it wasn't what I wanted to do forever. And I really did enjoy this. And so it was something where I looked at it and I just said, what if I just give this a go? And I'm I might have pulled the trigger on it a little early in the sense that, maybe should have built up a little more resources to start. I had about $2,000 in my bank account and a binder of cards. However, that $2,000 whittled away very quickly because I had to pay out my lease so that I could move. I had to set up a website so that I could get, distributor, and then file all the forms for, to federal and state and your sales tax license and all of that stuff. And so by the time all was said and done, when I actually started, I had the binder of cards in about $200. So it wasn't necessarily the most optimal start, and I would highly, highly recommend everyone to not do that. But it was just one of those situations where, I was kind of just in that grind, the 9 to 5 grind. And to me, the worst case scenario was, as long as I don't leverage and take on debt and I just work with what I have and, churn and burn it. That's the phrase, that people hear me say a lot, and do the best I can with this. If it doesn't work out, worst case, I just go get another 9 to 5 that, isn't my long-term thing and start the process over. So to me, at that age, it was 25 years old. It was worth the risk to really take that jump. And, because the downside was pretty low. I pretty much just end up right back at the same square that I started at. Because I hadn't worked my way up through that company of like super high or anything to where it wasn't going to be a far leap to just start over. And so for me, the upside potential of getting to be my own boss, getting to manage things, having my wage essentially dictated by how much and how hard I'm willing to work, that to me was a huge upside for the potential downside. And that was a risk that I weighed out. At least subconsciously, maybe at the time I wasn't weighing it out as much as what I do things now, but I definitely do know that I weighed that out in my head and made, that leap accordingly. And I guess just a real quick tidbit on this note for anyone that's listening, if you're starting to think, that's me, that, I'm in that situation. The one, yeah, and you point to yourself, yeah. And the one thing that I would say is, one, try to position yourself better than that, because you'll save yourself a lot of, heartache and stress over time, just to have the resources to actually work. But, the come up with a plan. That's the number one thing, and probably something that I didn't put enough diligence into, is really coming up with a plan, because you will find that it does not matter how much you plan. You will hit bumps in the road. You'll hit things you didn't expect, hangups in the process, and that kind of thing. And if you at least have some kind of a plan, some kind of a map to follow, even if you come off of your path, it becomes much easier to find your way back onto your path if you had some kind of a map than if you have nothing and you're just all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
And, I look back now and I had a lot of luck. My first set was Roaring Skies when I started. That,
Yeah.
the first set that I like pre-sold out. If that would have been Crimson Invasion, maybe my whole story would be much different.
Mm-hmm.
I had a few really good collection pickups. I had the fact that it just so happened that league I told you guys about that my mom took me to on New Year's Eve. The person that ran that league was now the TO of Fort Wayne in the Midwest regionals. And
Mm-hmm.
so that allowed me to be able to, have a connection that got me into a vendor spot and things like that, can had a lot of those pieces not fallen in place. I might not even be on this podcast right now having a discussion about all of this. So if you at least have some kind of a plan, you can at least kind of mold how that kind of stuff's going to shape out, even if it's not perfect. So I know I'm getting off on a little bit of a
No,
tangent
no,
here, but
I want to jump into this, and I don't know how comfortable you'll be about talking about numbers, but so back then it sounded like you paid off all your debt
Mhm,
before you started,
mhm,
and you left yourself with $200 and some cards. Now to me, like, yeah, I think you should set yourself a little bit, have a couple months of I can run this thing, but there's that other side of the conversation of you put your back to the wall and you can only fall forward. So not having that fallback, I'm huge on that. There's a Denzel Washington speech. He talks about falling forward, and it creates the opportunity of like being prepared of falling forward because you know what you're falling on. If you have a fallback, you're not going to go 100%. You're not going to go all in on it. And so I think, I mean, telling people to do that is probably dumb and not safe, but like that's one way that
mhm.
all these actors you see, like they drove out to LA, lived out of their
Yeah.
van, had nowhere else to go, so that's all they did, and it worked out. Sure, it was 1% of them, but
Mhm.
setting yourself up like that can be very motivating and lead to success. And yeah,
Yeah.
there is luck involved, but
Mhm.
it's
Well, and sometimes it is just put pressure on yourself.
hmm
It's very easy when, you work your 9 to 5, say, and you have your paycheck and, maybe you're not living the most lavish life, but your bills are covered, but you want to start this business or this side hustle. It becomes much easier to make excuses or get lethargic and not do it when you do have that security blanket of, well, if it doesn't work out, I just keep working my 9 to 5.
hmm
And, so for me, as someone that, I was always in school. I was always the person that stayed up the night before and did my assignments, and I would always get everything done. My dad was a very stickler on school and getting all of your assignments turned in, nothing late, etc. But I would always wait till the last minute, and so I've always been that kind of person to kind of have to put the pressure on to really like do my best work. And so for me, at least, looking at how I operate best, that probably was the best way for me to operate. Now, obviously, having more capital and more, liquidity would be much better.
Hmm.
But at least putting that pressure on, this is make or break. Like this has to work because you don't have a fallback, at least right now. Your
Hmm.
fallback's, going to work, anywhere, minimum wage job. And so to me, that being my fallback, and obviously I don't want that, it put that pressure on me to succeed and made it much easier, when I've worked a 16-hour day to push through and work 4 more hours before I go to bed versus just, oh, well, I'll do this task tomorrow and that
Right.
kind of thing. And so, at least for how I'm constructed as a person, that did work well for me. And I think that's something that kind of everyone just has to be honest with themselves. And I think that's kind of the importance of this whole process is you really have to be honest with yourself in terms of, if you want to start a business or you want to take this full time and not even necessarily like this hobby, but just anything in particular, whether it's sneaker flipping or being an artist or a musician or whatever, be honest with yourself. How hard are you willing to work? How much do you expect or want to make? How long do you give yourself before you have to get to that point before you deem it a success or a failure? And a lot of times people don't ask themselves these questions. They jump in head first and then they didn't, it's part of that map, that roadmap. They don't lay any of that out. They don't come up with any sort of a plan. And so, either maybe they don't do as well as what they thought they were going to do by X point or that kind of thing. And it really, it becomes, almost like a hindrance. They get in their own head and, they're not successful. And if you look at some of the absolute most successful people, they weren't successful for a long time from the day they started to when they actually, hit that benchmark of what they determined as success. They had a lot of those ups and downs and they had to push through a lot of adversity. And I think, pretty much that's that like mental fortitude. And I think coming up with that plan at the start gives you a lot of that mental fortitude to push through that. If your first year out the gate isn't the biggest success that you can push through to year two because you set it up that if this doesn't kick off in 2 years, then I'll reevaluate or whatever. And so for me at least, I might not have had the best start in terms of finances. I do think I had a great start in terms of mental fortitude and actually being honest with myself on what my expectations were, what I wanted out of this, and everything moving forward. And it really allowed me then to focus on the things I needed to do to get there and kind of figure out what stepping stones I needed to hit to actually get to that point versus just kind of winging it.
Right.
And so the last point I just kind of want to make in this is real quick just so I don't forget it because I've thought of it like 3 times and then lost it while we were talking about this. I didn't start with a lot of money, but I one started with a lot of opportunity and a great time, and I had really built up my reputation in the community. And this isn't like a tooting my horn thing, but it was one of those things I could go to an event in the Midwest or in my area, or even nationals, and it would take me 45 minutes to get across the room because I would get stopped by so many people to talk
Mm.
and chat and that kind of thing. Networking and connections. Money is a lot of it, especially in today's era where everything is so much more expensive and the barrier of entry is so much higher, but you can make up some of that ground with networking, with knowledge, doing a ton of research, becoming really knowledgeable, finding your niche, going in and honing in on maybe something that other people aren't doing. And there's a lot of people out there that play the penny stocks of the hobby. They'll buy the cheaper cards and spec on them, whether it's competitive play or just grading or whatever, and flip them. And that's only something you can do if you have more knowledge than pretty much everyone else that you're dealing with. And
Right.
so if you're out there and you're saying, I want to start this, but I don't have a lot of resources, I would recommend to get the resources or try to, but you can make up some of that ground with, knowledge and preparation. And I think a lot of people lose sight of that.
Yeah. So it's so when you started, it sounds
Mhm.
like you were just doing modern. I mean, the vintage was big. It wasn't like it is now, but in our heads at any time really, it was expensive.
Mhm.
When I was buying base set boxes for $1,500, that was expensive.
Mhm.
So was that your focus then? You were doing modern to start, like that's.
So yeah, so my foothold was definitely in the competitive community. So I knew, the best ways to break down sets in terms of selling out a set. Like I remember one of the things that I was one of the first ones on the scene to do was trainer lots. So it would
Mhm.
be play sets of every trainer in a set. And it was a good way that you could sell off the staples, but you could also sell off a lot of the less lucrative trainers that people might not buy individually. You put them in lots and you kind of build that cost in, and people would do it because they can just knock everything out at once. And,
Right.
then other stores started to take that on and that kind of thing.
Okay.
And so that was, modern was my foothold. I did dabble with, vintage. And obviously, if you pick up collections, I remember, back then you used to be able to buy some of the worst Watsy Hollows, like Lapras and Muck and things like that for 25 cents a piece, just
Right.
bulked out. People
Mm-hmm.
just, sold them like that. So I think yes, I was in modern, but I think the point you have to make sure everyone is aware of is that modern back then is different than what modern is now. Back then we're in the black and white, heart, gold, soul, silver, and then eventually, XY era for when I actually started the business. And so, EX era didn't really seem like vintage,
Mm-hmm.
the gold stars and things like that. That didn't really seem like vintage because it wasn't really that long ago.
Yeah, it was like
And
5 years
where,
or 10. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. And whereas now, that's 15 years ago. And so, it's much more on that, that vintage, or I like to say semi-vintage, which
Yeah.
is, I think a lot of people think it's a meme. I actually believe that. But
The Silver Age.
yeah, exactly. And I think it's so much less about vintage, semi-vintage, modern as it
Mm-hmm.
is just figuring out how to categorize things so you can appropriately assess data.
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm very big on data. I'm very big on trying to use trends. One of my degrees in college was in history. And so trying to use past history to kind of predict how things are going to move in the future. And so I'm very big on removing emotion and letting the data speak for me. And so when I say things like vintage, semi-vintage, and modern, you can call them whatever you want. It's more for me of just how can I figure out an easy way to categorize sets of data so that I can kind of figure out how to attribute it. Because a set of data for modern might not work the same way as a set of data for semi-vintage or vintage. And
Mm-hmm.
so that's kind of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, so yeah, we've kind of talked about this, but yeah, I left my 9 to 5.
Mhm.
My last.
Congratulations, by the way. It's
Thank you.
exciting.
Thank you. My last day was Friday, the whatever the last Friday is. Today's the 24th. So you guys can do
welcome to business ownership where you don't even know the day you're on.
And yeah, I mean, the way that I set myself up briefly, I've built a reputation off of vintage product and
Mhm.
have created a network myself through that. And earlier this year, I, although somewhat regrettably, sold a whole bunch of my product off that is worth maybe 5-10 times now, 6 months later, to pay off my student loans, pay off my car, pay off all my debt. And, that's just like a kind of a freedom in your head to move on to the next step. So 'cause I was preparing for this step to move out of my 9 to 5. And I mean, I was making good money. I mean, low six figures. And yeah, I got to that point where I was looking at my Excel sheet and I noticed, oh, I'm making more on this now than I am my 9 to 5, and I put 10% of my time into it. Let's take a shot here. So, yeah, that I think I set myself up financially to do this, but on your end, talking about the planning and whatnot, I'm a little bit behind on that. I definitely have some paperwork to fill out still, and
Well, luckily you're still in the early phase, so you
yeah,
still have time. It's not like you're 2 years in and like, man, I really should have created a plan back then. So, but yeah, that's definitely a first. One of the first things and like to get started with. But you're doing a lot of things right. Like
Mhm.
just a quick commentary. Networking. That's one of the huge things. You set yourself up financially. I mean, of the three things I mentioned, and clearly you are knowledgeable on the products that you're dealing with. I mean, of those three things, I mean, you've pretty much knocked them all out. Now I would just kind of try to formulate and hone them into a plan to move forward. And I don't think, since you have a lot of the pillars in place for success and have really built that foundation, I don't think you'll have much difficulty in doing it.
Right, and that's one of the selfish reasons why I wanted to bring you on this podcast, because I wanted to pick your brain a little bit on
Mhm.
what's happening now and kind of your strategy that goes along with it, because like you said, modern is different now than it was then, and there's a lot of scalpers going through. There's a lot of it. I think Pokemon's actually looking at collectors now, even though some people disagree with that. But Champion's Path is going nuts. I mean,
Mhm.
the allocations, we're all aware of what's happening. I went to my local store today to pre-order some for tomorrow, and they limited me to 2 of each product, which I'm happy that they do that. You know, they provide fair prices to everybody to do so. But I also pre-ordered probably close to 100 ETBs through GameStop, through other sites.
Mhm.
And again, I know vintage. I love that stuff. I know the best ways to maximize my profit off of that. But when it comes to modern, I kind of feel like a little boy where I get excited and want to open up a bunch of stuff, um, and I don't really know the best way to go about it. So, what are your plans for Champions Path to I guess maximize your profit on this
Mhm.
set?
So so for Champions Path in particular, and there's a lot to unpack here because
Hmm.
you open the can of worms now.
Dive
I
in,
just want
dude.
to put it on free, to answer your question first with Champions Path, it's kind of the way I tackle any set. Is first I do an overall analysis of the set, and so for me, one of the first things I looked at was when it was just first announced, we didn't know anything in the set, was what has Japan had that we have not had? Because
Hmm.
that's usually a good indicator of what we're going to get. And so the first inclination that a lot of people would have said was Tag All Stars. And that was my first inclination too. Now the thing that was kind of odd about that was, GXs were in that and we've already moved on to Vs. So that was where I was kind of hesitant. However, if you looked at some of their past sets, there were some cards they left out: the Gardevoir, the Dreadnought, the Obstagoon, those kind of cards that were almost surely either going to be in this set or the November set. And, a real quick side note here is something that you guys are going to, the viewers out there and yourself are going to hear when I kind of talk about this is there's a lot of speculation that goes into this. And there's a reason why for that. But so that was kind of where I was honing in is maybe Tag All Stars would kind of be the secret rares of this, or some of the full art trainers, and then some of the cards that we were missing from the previous set would kind of fill that in. However, then the promos came out in Japan, the lottery, or not the lottery promos, the tournament promos, the two
Hmm.
Charizards, Charizard V full art and Charizard V Max hyper rare. And then they announced we got it, Poke Beach leaked that the full art was going to be in our ETB. At that point, that to me was a large indicator that we almost surely were going to get the hyper rare. I was more of the belief that it would have been in a premium collection. That to me seemed like the most logical based on the way they've structured the collections in the past, with a hyper rare being featured,
Hmm.
at least in Dragon's Majesty and Shining Legends, they did it that way. And so that to me, and Hidden Fates, so that to me was kind of the connect there. They ended up putting it in the set, which was even better. Then they even gave us a shiny V, which I think is a great indicator for Japan, by the way, on the flip side of
Hmm.
what could be in their shiny V set. But that they effectively, though, I had to put my order in before that. I can't wait for the set list. So when I put my order in with a distributor before that, I kind of just based it on theorizing what could be in this set.
Hmm.
And there's pretty much two ways it could go. You either have your Dragon's Majesty, where it's really not that stellar of a set. It did have the gold Ultra Necrozma, which was really cool, but it really didn't have much else. Or you have your other side where it's a Hidden Fates or Shining Legends esque set. I was more, because of what we were missing on that side of the coin, than I was on it being a dud set. And so I went pretty hard into it. So once I went hard into it, obviously, I ordered a lot of product. Allocations from distributors started to come out, and they told us, things are going to be in two waves, but the allocation was a little higher than what I was expecting, coming off of the back of Hidden Fates, where getting any product, even at the distributor level, was like pulling teeth. It was kind of a nice surprise to hear, oh, you ordered X amount, but you're getting 50%. It's going to be in two waves, but at least you're getting it.
Hmm.
And so once that part came out, um, then it was a situation where it's in two waves. The lesser parts at the start, meaning if this is a dud set, that second wave is going to be pretty difficult to sell. And so I wanted to hedge my risk a little bit. So I actually went ahead and pre-sold out some packs from the double boxes, probably about 3 days too early, because the list leaked about 3 days after that. But and that's one of those risks, right? That's the whole point of hedging your risk, because if the set ends up being a dud, you can sell your product at MSRP, especially going into the holiday season, pretty regularly. The difficulty is more the liquidity of it.
Hmm.
Getting the price point's not that hard. It's how many people are actively going to be chasing this versus how much is out there. And so to me, it was just better to hedge the risk a little bit, not sell the full allocation of product, but sell a decent chunk of the first wave just to hedge that risk, knowing that if it is just a huge banger of a set, I do still have second wave and I do still have a good chunk of my first wave. And this way, then if it is kind of a dud, I've already pulled some of that money in to recoup that initial investment to where I'm not, I don't have this massive overhead hanging over me. So that's kind of how I generally deal with a lot of these sets. Um, the only reason that the only set I haven't done that with is Shining Legends, and the only reason I didn't do that one is the stuff leaked pretty early on,
Hmm.
and I felt very confident in the strength of Shinings, Test Tube Mewtwo, Hyper Rare Mewtwo, that kind of thing. And so I didn't do it with that one. And so a lot of times it really just depends on how much information you're playing with. It all goes back to that knowledge thing. I was able to construct kind of my picture of what I thought Champion's Path could look like based on all this knowledge and data I've acquired of all of these other sets. So to me, you know, it was a lot more of an an in-depth picture. There's somebody in our Discord that was convinced the Hyper Charizard was going to be in the set, and congratulations, they were right to him.
Hmm.
But the data, at least before set list leaks, would have told us that the betting odds were not in that favor, and that a premium collection would have been in that favor for it to be the poster child to sell their big box set of the holiday season. And so sometimes it doesn't matter how much data you have, you can still be wrong. And that's all part of that hedging your risk and that kind of thing. However, more often than not, that will lead you to prosperity on the other side. And so it goes back to that whole acquire as much data, acquire as much knowledge, try to put these pictures together as best you can. And, you know, gather as much information as you can from as many sources. I heard so many interesting opinions, that many of which I hadn't even considered, on how the set could be structured, how it could be released, and that kind of stuff also, you put that with your data and you help it formulate. The only thing there is just be careful that you don't get into a kind of a hive mind mentality where you're surrounded by a bunch of the same people and they're all saying the same things, and so you convince each other that that's exactly what's going to happen because it's what you want to happen versus what will happen.
Hmm.
I think the second the full art Charizard was announced, everyone was, this is going to be the next Hidden Fates. This
Yeah.
is going to be the next Hidden Fates. And the reality was, unless they gave us the Charizards and Tag All Stars, it wasn't. And that was very unlikely. And at least based on the data that I had. And
Hmm.
so to me, because I still looked at the structure of the set and I said, two Charizards, great. Once the list got leaked, two Charizards, great. But there's not a lot of other meat here. And, you have the Hyper Gardevoir, the Hyper Piers and Kabu, that kind of stuff. But, those aren't cards people are going to go out and pay $8 a pack to chase.
Right.
They will for Charizard, but they won't for others. Whereas Hidden Fates on the other side of the coin, you're chasing Charizard, but you've got 92 other shinies or whatever the total number was that you can rip out of a pack and feel like that pack was a success.
Hmm.
And Umbreon, Sylveon, Glaceon, Leafeon, like all of these Pokemon that are they're highly desired cards that if you don't hit that creme de la creme peak, you still feel good about what you bought. Whereas right now, I think this set is much more reflective of Burning Shadows, which funny enough also had Gardevoir as its backup card, but Burning Shadows or Unbroken Bonds, where it's pretty much Charizard or bust. Those cards were great for competitive play, and the sets were,
Hmm.
but for the average collector, it's pretty much you chase Charizard. And so
Right.
to me, I always call those sets the Charizard lottery.
Hmm.
You open them and you either hit Charizard or you don't hit Charizard. Whereas Hidden Fates was not that way. I am actually of the belief that Hidden Fates is the best design set Pokemon's ever done.
Yeah.
And so to me, going into Champion's Path, the odds that lightning strikes twice like that and back to back on subsets was very unlikely. And
Hmm.
so I think once those Charizards got leaked and everyone started going crazy, I got nervous because I think when you get to that upper echelon where you're shooting for one card or two cards in this instance for two Charizards, everything else is going to dive down because there's going to be so much out there and so much products getting opened, and most people are not actively seeking out those cards. People want to set finish and people like those Pokemon, but for the most part, 90% of the people you see open are saying Charizard or bust. And so to me, when I'm watching and I'm specking on something, I'm going to look at this set and say, there's going to be a point where the expected value of this set has to balance out. If packs are $8 a pack, then your expected value out of a pack has to balance, say, $8. So
Hmm.
the higher Charizard runs, the lower everything else is going to run to meet that balance.
Right.
It doesn't mean it's going to stay that way forever, though. And
Right.
so to me, if I was going to spec, I would spec far less on Charizards, and I would spec far more on some of these mid-tier hyper rares that are also going to have equally low pull rate as the hyper rare Charizard, and potentially could just hit this really huge rock bottom floor that then recovers later.
Well, and
And
that's something you're speculating now is these full art trainers, and that's something for the Vivid Voltage set. From what I've seen, they've got some really nice ones coming out. So I agree with you on that. There is gonna this set's gonna do well. Champions Path, no doubt in my mind. The fact that ETBs are $100, I think, is a price to stay. I think that early on there it's going to be rising, but there will be some reflection points, and but yeah, it's safe. It's a Charizard chase. Everybody will want to do it continually until all the packs are gone. But yeah, I don't see it comparing to Hidden Fates at this point. That first 12 hours of hearing, oh, there's Charizards, yes, it's the next Hidden Fates, it's better.
Yeah.
But then pretty quickly it was a different conversation, and everyone was in agreement that there's not much else to this set.
And I want to interject on you there, because you said it's safe, and I think that's dangerous. I think that's I want to call you on it, because
no, please.
For anyone listening, they hear it's safe. ETBs are going to stay at 100. Everyone's going to chase Charizard. It's safe until it isn't. And what I mean by that is we have no guarantee that they won't release. We already have a wave 2 of ETBs that, just based on allocation numbers that people have given out publicly, we know the wave 2 is most likely going to be 2, if not 3 times the size of wave 1, meaning there will be a lot more supply. And GameStop moved their full wave 1 back to wave 2, or had it moved on them. I don't know the full story, but so there's going to be a lot more product coming out. There's also no guarantee that they won't do a wave 3, 4, 5, 6. The thing you have to remember is we're going into the holiday season, and Pokemon's going to make sure that they have their product in front of their consumers on the shelves for the holidays. And so with that, if Champions Path's selling out everywhere, they're going to find a way to get Champions Path on the shelves, so that, when little Billy and his mom go to the store and want to buy something for Christmas, that they're grabbing the newest, hottest Pokemon product and not Yu-Gi-Oh! Or Magic or something else. And so right now, yes, wave 1 definitely seems very safe, because the scarcity of it is, in supply of it's quite low. But there is no guarantee that as wave 2 or 3 comes down, I think the set's going to remain pretty hot through Christmas.
Yeah.
That being said, I always am really cautious to give out that it's safe, or it's a one you hear is, oh, it's a guarantee, or it's a no brainer, or you throw your money at the wall and it's going to make you money, and that's kind of where we're at in the hobby right now. And I think that's just a really dangerous mentality to put yourself in, because that's adding emotion to it. There's no such thing as safe.
So I'm looking at the historic points of this too. So with so to me, this, I don't think there is a way, yes, you're getting product in 2 different times, but this is one wave of production that had to be split up because they could not meet the demand on it in time. So to me, this is one production run, but it's just split up over the course of two different dates, which we know with Hidden Fates, they did just the one time with ETBs, and they never reprinted the ETBs. ETBs. Their reprints were tins and only tins up until now. So I'm looking at that point, and again, Hidden Fates, it got some media attention. There was a lot of demand for it, but Pokemon just decided to reprint tins and not do any other products.
And so with that, I think a lot of that comes down to just supply chain right now.
Yeah.
With COVID happening and everything, obviously the supply chain on products has gotten backed up. It's not just in Pokemon, it is in Magic, it's in Yu-Gi-Oh!, it's in sports cards, it's pretty much everything. And a lot of these companies share the same printers. I would say the one big difficulty is, and this was something that had started prior to COVID, is that, not to go too deep in, world economics, but there is a trade war with China that is still going on and was going on prior to COVID. I suspect that a lot of those sleeves and inner plastic boxes and things like that are manufactured in China. And so I would assume, if I'm right in that assumption, I'm sure I could just look on my sleeves and it would tell me that would be more why tins would be reprinted than maybe the ETBs, because you do have the sleeves and the dice that you would also have to manufacture. in import into the country, and there
Yep.
could be a lot of difficulty with supply chain with that as well because they were also hit so hard by COVID. So it may have been more of a convenience thing than what, because from Pokemon's perspective, you want to print it all, right? If
Yeah.
people are willing to buy it, you just want to print it all.
Yeah.
But it may have been this is what we can print here, or what we can print, in Cartamundi in the States, or what we can print in Europe, versus what we could print, and have all of the components come together because they're not all manufactured in the same.
Right.
So that would be why I would say ETBs, in my opinion at least, were probably not reprinted versus tins, and that's why we've seen just so many tin waves versus an ETB.
Yeah, and that might still continue. We don't know.
Absolutely, 100%,
And
100%. If
and
I had to bank on anything in Champions Path getting reprinted, it would be double boxes.
right, and from what I saw, at least from pre-orders, there was a lot more variety of products, I believe, than Hidden Fates.
Mhm.
Um,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure there's going to be some other ones coming out too.
Mhm.
So again, looking at the historical data from just Hidden Fates,
Mhm.
they'll have plenty of different new products during
Mhm.
that holiday season, for their customers to buy. So yeah, I mean, sure. Again, Pokemon can do whatever they want. I mean, they
Absolutely.
gave us a shiny Charizard that Japan didn't even have,
Mhm.
so it's impossible to
And
know. And I love that because it's messing with us. It's messing with the
yeah.
flippers. It's messing with the collectors. It's messing with, and they're keeping it organic and true for their
Yeah,
true
it
fans
breaks
and their
the status
players.
quo. It
Yeah.
makes it so you can't just predict everything, know every release.
Hmm.
And I think you make a good point with the ETBs in particular on, a lot of times people will speculate on a set as a whole, Champions Path as a whole. I always get asked, is this a long-term hold? Well, what are you holding? Like, are you holding singles? Are you holding ETBs? Are you holding pin boxes? And I think you make a great point. I agree. I think if anything gets reprinted, I don't think it's the ETBs, just with the way the whole climate is and everything right now. And it's a more expensive product that you generally would reprint one of your less expensive products because the accessibility is there. And so, if I was specking, I do think ETBs would be a better spec than the pin or double boxes. I think the ETBs would be a better spec or sealed product as a whole than probably the singles.
Hmm.
And so I think the point that you make there is a really good one to flesh out in terms of there's a lot of components to these sets, and there's a lot of ways you can speculate on them, whether it is the set as a whole or the components within a set. And I think we're seeing that with Hidden Fates, right? If you spec on the ETBs, you're making a killing right now, and even the tins for the most part. But if you spec'd on the singles, I mean, for a while there, you were nervous. A lot of those singles were $10 a piece. I remember shiny Buzzwole GX was $3.
Yeah.
And, the market demand obviously has risen this year exponentially. And that really helped absorb a lot of that. But had Hidden Fates singles not had 2020 growth numbers, those for all intents and purposes, other than Charizard, could still be quite low, and as a spec would have been pretty poor,
Hmm.
and so I like that you mentioned the ETBs in particular, because I do think that it kind of shows the nuance of how particular you really can get with like a spec or an investment or something like that.
Yeah, and that's another thing. Like I spec the Hidden Fates ETBs. I'm all out of it now, but they're easy to store. They come with a really nice promo, and um, yeah, I think it was the best pack price per pack as well, from what I remember.
Hmm.
Um, and just the fact with Champions Path, you got. I mean, you have some now, but the box artwork is beautiful. The Charizard up
Hmm.
front, and then getting a Charizard promo, like it's that to me, it's the right choice if you're buying Champions Path. And if you have any money to spend on it, that's where I'm putting it. I don't.
Hmm.
I'm gonna get a couple of the other things so I can open and have some fun with it and
Hmm.
do some of that. But because yeah, I'll be chasing the Charizards as well.
Yeah, it's
But
definitely the feature product, and
yeah.
I should have grabbed one and had it here because I do have them. But like, it is a black box. It has the orange embossing on it. Charizard is embossed, like texturized.
Hmm.
Everything. You could tell it's a very premium product,
Hmm.
and even Double, to a certain extent, I was very impressed with their boxes. They kind of gave it that gloss sheen on it,
Oh, really?
everything, and you can tell that they're really trying to make these more like a premium product, and their subsets more like premium products, instead of just, oh, here's a collection box that looks like other collection
Hmm.
boxes. And so I absolutely agree with you. I think a lot of people underestimate how much just that type of thing can really influence a product. in terms of its long-term potential is just kind of the marketability of it. It looks like a premium product. It looks like something somebody would want to own and collect. There's going to be tons of people that, even if the hobby wanes, right? Even if we go through a dip period or a down period and some of the people exit the hobby, new people find Pokemon every single day,
Hmm.
and new people enter. There's going to be somebody in 2022 that decides they want to enter Pokemon and become a sealed collector that wasn't around for this, and they're going to see that Charizard ETB and they're going to look at it and say, that is an awesome product. I want that on my shelf as a display piece, or I want this as part of my collection.
Hmm.
And I think sometimes people underestimate just how much, the aesthetic of a product can matter, not maybe as much as what's in it, but that it does matter. And I think we first saw that with the super premium collections that had the Mew and Mewtwo full arts in it. It was this nice jumbo box, but you see all the product in like this diorama behind it. You
Hmm.
see the promos right out front. And I mean, those things are like 200 and some dollars now. And at the
Yeah.
time, they weren't that expensive. They didn't fly off the shelves. They weren't insanely allocated. And now, I mean, we see a multi-$100 product that, has withstood the test of time. And I think a lot of the aesthetic really plays into that because it is a fun product to have sealed and look over and, look at it on your shelf and see all of that there nice and displayed. And so I think the ETBs really cater into that type of
Hmm.
thing too.
Okay, so to summarize your strategy, I think with Champion's Path, it seems like you're playing the card of you're going to break out some packs, sell sealed pack lots, whether it's
Hmm.
36 pack lots or whatever,
Hmm.
booster box lots,
Hmm.
and then hold on to some sealed product over time.
Hmm.
But you're not going to be doing any mass openings, mass gradings of this stuff. Um,
Um, it's tough. I can't really say yet. It really depends on what that wave 2 does in
okay.
terms of, if the market just absorbs it through Christmas, soaks it all up,
Hmm.
then probably not because the price will remain high. If it
Right.
does start to wane, starts to dip, maybe the Charizards give away a little bit and the pack price does drop, then yeah, I could definitely see myself grading some of it and taking some of those cards and, taking them out and grading and kind of doing those mass openings. So
Hmm.
it really just
Okay.
depends on how much work you have to put in versus how much payoff you get.
Right. Right. Okay. Very cool. So, um, leading into grading, you actually made a pretty big vintage graded sale the other day, first edition
Mhm.
Charizard.
I
Um,
did. I'd show you, but he already has it.
actually, it's
The guy
on.
already has it.
I think I got your Instagram up here.
I was gonna say
There
I
she
did
is.
post it on Instagram.
PSA 7, $11,500.
It was. Yep.
That's incredible. I
Yeah, and the person
sold
had to pay
one.
sales tax, so it was actually 12.3 for
Yeah,
what they paid. Yeah.
yeah. I sold one last December for $2,200, and I paid $2,000 for it and was holding on to it for like a year and a half or two. And I was like, all right, I'm gonna just buy something else with this money.
Mhm.
And obviously, it's the wrong decision. But
No, well, I want to stop you there because this is the second time I've heard you mention this, that, like almost like a seller's remorse, a
oh,
regret, or,
everything I've
and
sold, I regret
yeah, but you
it.
can't. And I want
Right.
to give you a story
Please do.
about that
Please do.
because one of my greatest pickups is also probably one of my greatest mismanagements, I guess you could say.
Hmm.
It was actually in your neck of the woods, that I picked up I got a tip off of it, of a collection. It was a master set collection. So it was base unlimited through Furious Fists,
Hmm.
and there was none of the first edition WotC sets. They were all unlimited, but everything was packed fresh. And when I say master set, I mean the regular and reverse foil. If there were pre-release promos, staff promos, errors, stamped, whatever, all of it.
Hmm.
And the whole collection, it cost, I'm trying to remember the exact number. It was like with the driving, because the whole situation was they reached out to me. We agreed on a number. I had a regional coming up that I was getting ready to vend in like 2 weeks. And so I wanted to keep as much money liquid for that because you never know what's going to come through your door to regional. So I just said, hey, can I buy it after the regional? I went to bed that night. It's like 3 a.m. I wake up in the middle of the night. What if something happens? What if, unfortunately the house would burn down or flood or whatever, that like this collection just goes away. And I'm like, you're an idiot. Go get the money out of the bank. Go. So I messaged him the next day. Can I come pick it up today? And I drove 8 hours, went and grabbed the collection, drove 8 hours back. It cost, it was around 7,000
Hmm.
for everything. This was back in 2016, just
Wow.
mind you, not
Wow.
2020.
Right.
Um, but at the time, it was still a great deal.
Hmm.
And I mean, obviously, you can't go through every single book and every single card and every single page. so I did have to kind of, factor that into the price, that kind of thing. All the books themselves were super old and dusty. They were kept up in an attic. So there was a little bit of concern there that maybe, the sleeves were really old and worn, but the cards themselves were immaculate.
Hmm.
And this was one of those collections that was very early. It was like, I think it was February or March of 2016. And it was incredible. And I knew I would do well with it. I had just started getting into grading in 2015, so I knew I wanted to grade some of it. But it was also a situation where, to grade, 11,000 cards or whatever would, be way more than like the money I could throw at it at the time. And so it was a situation where over time I kind of, I ended up taking a big chunk of it and piecing out to one person that wanted to buy that. And I got to keep out, X amount of cards. Like I kept the Crystal Charizards, the Ray Gold Star, a few of the other gold stars, some of the shinings, etc. And to give you an idea of the quality of this collection, the Ray Gold Star got a 9, the Latios and Latias got 9s, and everything else I sent got 10s.
Wow.
So this thing was immaculate. And my full take home after selling the graded cards and everything was right around like $43,000. And this all happened right before the big Pokemon Go boom,
Hmm.
and just kind of the 2016 boom. And so, for me, I hear you, kind of, ping pong back and forth with, oh, I regret this sale, I regret that sale. In 2016, that collection probably went to about $250,000. In
Hmm.
2020, that collection graded out and done, the correct way, and you take the full time of maximizing profit, it's probably $1 million.
Hmm.
And so for me, that, that's a hard pill to swallow when I look back on it. But that sale, had that not happened, um, sure, it would have been worth a lot of money, but I still wouldn't have had the money built up to then make, the appropriate moves with it in terms of
Right.
grading and that kind of thing. I also, that sale facilitated so many other things than I did, capitalizing on, all kinds of product releases that came out. Shining Legends was one that, that money really helped me, buy Shining Legends in 2017 and Evolutions in 2016, which now I'm still selling graded Mega Charizards in a 10 for $250,
Right.
and things like, Test Tube Mewtwo's at 750, things like that. So that really facilitated more sales down the line. So I guess my big thing is like, to anyone out there, you included, if you made the best move at the time for the knowledge that you had, you can't really regret it because it did facilitate other things and you can't predict the future. The only caveat to that I would say is make sure that you're selling it at the time because you want to sell it and you think it's the right move, even if you end up being wrong, even if you think it's the right move, not because you've put yourself in a position that you're forced to sell. And I think that's why I call it my greatest mismanagement is there were other things at the time I could have sold to
Right.
free up liquidity
That
and
was going to
things
be
like
my
that.
point. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I think that's one of those big things where I I didn't really understand the value of that and putting yourself in a position and sometimes just keeping liquidity open and not running yourself so thin so that you can make the optimal plays with what you already do own.
Hmm.
And that was one of those instances where, seeing that option at liquidity right then and there would really alleviate a lot of other stresses. And in reality, I should have just put myself in a position where I could have waited and sold it when I felt was most opportune because of what it was worth and not most opportune because my bank account needed it.
Hmm.
And so I think that's the big takeaway from that. And hopefully, you can look at maybe some of those past sales and
No.
say, I
Yeah.
did do the best I could have at the time with what I had and what I knew.
Right. And it's just it's yeah, I probably over exaggerate, but yeah, looking back and being able to learn from it still. I mean, yeah, it's painful, but you need to be able to fight through that and learn from it.
Mhm.
Everything that I sold, it went towards something. It went towards my debt. I paid that off. It went towards a different purchase. It went towards something that
Mhm.
continued to build. But yeah, a lot of it was back in the day. And even still today, I just sold a first edition Neo Destiny box, and I know it's going to be worth more, but it created a relationship that is it's priceless.
Mhm.
Um, and but yeah, looking back at these sales, and there was a lot of mid tier stuff that I could have sold, and I wouldn't be thinking twice about it today,
Mhm.
um, because I would got to hold on to that top tier stuff. So when you're selling something, yeah, you want to, like you said, be in that position where you don't have to sell, but really, really think about what level of rarity, scarcity is this
Mhm.
item that I'm selling, and will I be able to get it back, and all that. So
And
yeah,
how much could withstand the test of time versus maybe these other items that I could sell. Absolutely. You
right,
know, I sold a 9 first edition Charizard in 2015 for $1,300. You
yeah,
know, and at the time that was market value. You know, that was great. That facilitated so many other purchases.
hmm
I mean, today I have one, I'm getting $30,000 offers on it. Sure, I'd love to have that one back. But
right,
would I even be where I am today had I not made that sale?
right. Like
And
I had a case of base set, a case of first edition Gym Challenge. I brought in some other money to help me buy it. First of all, I mean, I wish I went into debt and bought it, but um, that created relationships that helped build my brand and build my place in the hobby. And
Mhm,
yeah, that was more valuable than even I think what it's worth today, which is
mhm.
$250,000, whatever boxes are going for. So yeah, it's just something that you need to plan out when you're doing it, and have a plan
Mhm.
after with what you're doing with that
Yeah.
money. So um,
Well, and you had no guarantee. Say you do go into debt, you don't take that additional money, and
right,
Pokemon doesn't pan out. Now you've got this debt breathing down your neck and interest accumulate. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
so again, you got to weigh everything within its scope, and you do want to try to make those long term judgment calls and things like that, and maybe get rid of things you don't think will weather well. And I think this kind of is a good point to touch on, kind of the way I invest.
hmm
Like my philosophy on it is, like I said before, I'm very try to remove emotion, very data driven. And so when I buy something that I consider an investment, I set time benchmarks, of if this isn't performed to X period and X time, on either side, that I'll move it into something else, and if it, for example, I'll also set price targets. If I buy something for 1,000, I'll set a price target maybe for that item of 2,000. And if it hits 2,000, I'll reassess at that point.
hmm
And if I can't, have some piece of data that tells me it's going to continue to go much more or a lot more, that I'd be, kind of dumb to sell it at that point, then I sell it. And, sometimes setting those targets makes it much easier to not FOMO in, which is the fear of missing out, into a market where well, everything's going up right now. It's everything's going so high. I can't sell anything right now because I'm going to sell it, and 2 weeks later it's going to be worth double the amount, and I'm going to regret it.
hmm
And because everything goes up, and again, until it doesn't, right?
right.
And I think a lot of people learned that with Bitcoin a few years ago.
Oh yeah.
Everything goes to the moon until it comes back down to earth. And so that's one of those things where sometimes you can do that, and you can do it on the other side too. If my investment either hasn't produced X amount or it started to drop and hits certain threshold, I'll sell it and take my loss and move on. And a good example of that is, the Charizard sale that you just mentioned and the other Charizards that I own now. I that was an investment that I made based on another investment I sold that had underperformed up to that point. I had done a lot of market research and global market research and kind of believe that maybe we were heading towards a recession, or at least a drawback period on Pokemon. And so back in 2019, I thought this investment's already underperforming. I'm going to put it in something that would be more resilient to that drawback. And, if the drawback doesn't happen, then, it's still relatively safe and go up. It might not have the biggest percent gain, but it may have a big dollar gain. And I was wrong. We didn't head towards a recession. We did the exact opposite. We
hmm
had towards a huge boom, but it was still a relatively safe play for the time. And it actually ended up turning into a huge boon. Had I kept those other cards that weren't performing and not set those targets and got emotional of, well, I've held them this long, I might as well just hold them a little longer and see if it goes, I'd still be holding those today and not be making, the record 7 sale and that kind of thing.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's I guess leading into a question that you can't answer, that no one can answer, but um, what are your thoughts on what's happening now with the market? I mean, we saw a base set box go from 15,000 to 30,000 within 5 days. We're seeing these, yeah, first edition Charizards going from, I mean, they were selling a couple months ago, or there was one that sold for 75,000. Now there's an offer of 130. Things
Mhm.
are going nuts, and to me, it does make sense on some of these things with the size of the buyer pool and the size, compared to the size of the pop reports and what's available on the market. But I mean, what do you think's going on?
So it's tough, right? Like, even in your question, it's tough to wrap your head around everything, because I think I think we've just experienced immense growth. And I think it's a combination of a lot of things. I think the way Pokemon has structured their sets and started constructing their sets has really changed over the last few years to really, like you said, kind of cater to the collector market, or even just, cater to, growing the hobby as a whole versus just kind of doing the same old pattern that they've done years on end. They're surprising us. They're making it new. They're making it exciting. I think that they are, in some regards, following the playbook that they're seeing is very successful in sports. Um, we're seeing a lot of media publicity. We've seen the rise and growth of fantastic YouTubers like Leonhardt. We've seen Gary V's jumping in. You've got other celebrities, Logan Paul. You've got all of these people jumping in, and this is all bringing marketing and publicity, which is going to garner more and more people into the hobby, whether it's to a nostalgia kick, whether it's I want to invest and make a quick buck, whether it's the flipper mentality, whatever it is. And it's bringing a lot of people in, which of course then you're going to see growth. And so when I look at it again, try to remove all that emotion, look at the layers. I start to look at with the level of interest and growth that we have right now, and how popular Pokemon is as a whole. I don't know if you know this. I suspect you do. You seem pretty well rounded, knowledgeable. Pokemon's the largest grossing media IP of all time.
Hmm.
It's larger than Hello Kitty, Star Wars, Mickey Mouse, all of these massive franchises. In fact, not only is it larger than all of them, its closest competitor is Hello Kitty, that started 19 years before it and's grossed 16 billion less dollars.
Right.
And so, it's one of those situations that in a lot of regards, I can look at this and say this makes absolute sense. I mean, Pokemon transcends cultural barriers. You can go to Japan with a keychain on your backpack that is a Pikachu, and you might not even be able to speak the language and talk to people in Japanese, but everyone knows Pikachu,
Hmm.
and so that kind of thing. So to me, in a lot of regards, it makes sense. A lot of regards, a lot of this growth makes sense. I think it was always going to happen. I think that a lot of maybe the really pocketed growth that we've seen right now was accelerated because of a lot of these variables that are coming together. And when I look back at the growth we had in 2016, it was kind of a perfect storm of a lot of things too.
Hmm.
20th anniversary, Pokemon Go, and you can theorize on, was that Pokemon's plan? Was it just a happy accident? Whatever. And you can do the same thing now. COVID, people are stuck at home. Obviously no one can predict that. The market starts to run, all of these things, 25th anniversaries next year, um and but I do think that there is the other side of that. And I think anytime you have what's called parabolic growth, which is when you go way up, you're most likely going to come back down some. And the question's always, how much do you come down? What comes down?
Hmm.
And do you just kind of go sideways, or do you have a massive dip? And the reason that I always tend to compare it to cryptocurrency right now, and I think a lot of people hate that comparison because they're very, very different things. But to me, I think we're to a point now where a lot of the people entering the hobby have a very baseline knowledge of Pokemon. Maybe they liked it growing up, or maybe they just see it as an investment vehicle now. And so they're starting to throw money into it. And I think the reason I like to compare it to Bitcoin is because there's a lot of like very intricate detail to cryptocurrency in general. But it gets to a point when you get into it with a very baseline knowledge that when you start putting money at something, it doesn't really matter what it is. It could be a widget, it could be literally anything. And people and money and emotions start to all react the same way. And we're seeing cards now that are going to the moon that a lot of people that have been very entrenched in the hobby for a long time sit and laugh at. First edition jungle eevees in PSA 10 for $600 that you could literally go buy near mint ones 2 months ago for a quarter.
Yeah.
And things like that we laugh at. But people like Eevee. It's Eevee's first print, things like that. And it's
Hmm.
like, so is this reasonable growth, or is this bubble growth? Essentially, always the question: are we
Right.
in a bubble? And I think there's a lot of things that the growth was maybe undervalued, and we've experienced very rapid growth, and a lot of it is just catching up to maybe where it always should have been. And I think a lot of other things are coattailing that.
Yeah.
And those are the kind of things I would tend to be more worried about, because even if a retrace does happen, um, or just sideways flatline, a lot of that older stuff, even if it does retrace 10, 20%, a lot of times it'll also be the first thing to snap back on any upward momentum as well. And it's the other stuff that's really coattailing it. One that comes to my mind is diamond and pearl and heart gold soul silver boxes. I mean, you could not sell those things for barely market or above market value. I remember I could still buy Majestic Dawn blister packs, the cardboard blister with one pack in it,
Yeah.
from a distributor all the way up until like 2018 for $4 a pack. And now people are they're $100. Well, where were all these people over the last 3 years that were this interested in, Majestic Dawn? Or a lot of these, we're seeing tons of these boxes across the board hit $3, $4, $5,000 that, the most expensive card in them is $8. And how many people are truly interested in this item because it's something they've always wanted to own and collect, versus I'm priced out of many other things, so I'm just going to buy it and put it on my shelf so I can say I also have something rare and valuable.
Right.
And once we start to kind of get into where it's less organic and more inorganic, or sometimes even irrational, that's when I start to get worried. And I think Warren Buffett has a really great quote on this, which is, when others get greedy, get fearful, and when others are fearful, get greedy. And I think we're really starting to bridge into that gap of greed. Where I don't know how many posts I see a day now of, just got in the hobby, really looking to invest. What do you guys think I should put my money into? Or, is Champions Path going to be a good long-term investment? And I know there's still collectors out there, but I feel like I'm seeing so much less passion about the hobby because of, I enjoy Pokemon and I love what it is. And I think a lot of us, even that make money, do truly love Pokemon and what it is, right?
Mhm.
Because our skills could transcend into many other fields that would make more money.
Right.
But right now, it does just feel like the enjoyment of the hobby is intrinsically based in what the value is, right? Like Champions Path is a fun set. It's a fun set. There's neat cards in it. There's some fantastic art in it. But right now, the whole fun is rooted in, is Charizard an expensive card, and will I pull one so I can make money on it? And I think we're starting to really bridge into that territory where I myself, and this is just my personal philosophy, but I get more reserved. I get more fearful. I just took a bunch of money out of other investments that were my short-term 1 to 2 year investments and my midterm 3 to 5 year, and I put it in first ed base. Because again, just like I did with Charizard, I think first ed base is, kind of that peak of vintage of our hobby. That, it's what I told my wife when I went to the Charizards. If Charizard goes to 0, I'm out of a job anyways. So, it kind of hedging my risk into that, right? Because at that point, my life's going to be turned upside down anyways to find something else. So, I went into kind of rounded out the rest of the first ed base with the other hollows and stuff, because I am kind of hedging against that. And if we keep going to the moon, first ed base will ride along with it, And so I think right now we're just in that sector of nobody can know and everyone wants to know. So everyone tries to theorize and throw out as much theory and data, and the only thing I'd say you can really do is try to remove your emotion from it and just look at as much data and as much historical analysis, not just in our field, but other fields, Magic, other collectibles, art, comics. I think the Silver Age of comics is a great thing to study. People never thought Fantastic Four #1 was going to end back up at $500, but it happened. And things like that, where it goes in waves. And I don't even know, maybe it's recovered today because collectibles are going to the moon again, but things like that go in waves. And I think it's a situation right now where anybody that tells you they have the answer, they don't. And you have to do what's best for you in your financial picture. If you are an investor, if you're a collector, none of this, you don't probably really care about much of it.
Right.
But as a whole, it's nobody has a crystal ball. So, everyone can just try to do the best they can through it. But I think overall, it is a super exciting time to be in the hobby. And I think the way all of this plays out over the next few years will be a fantastic set of data for figuring out pretty much the rest of at least my time in Pokemon and maybe a lot of yours. So.
Yeah. And one way that I've been moving, or had already moved, a lot of my investments into Japanese trophy cards and kind of the historic type market, which is still, I think that there's an awareness issue with these cards. But yeah, same deal with base set and these. Although this is a much smaller buyer pool than base set first edition.
Mhm.
It lies in that area of, if it does go down, will it really go down that far? And
Mhm.
there's, I think, a lot of growth potential still because of that awareness factor with those
Mhm.
types of cards. So um,
Absolutely.
yeah, I've been a little bit more bullish now on finally sending off cards to get graded, and that I've just been laying around. And uh, obviously with PSA's backup, I've sent quite a bit to CGC.
Mhm.
I've sent some of my higher end stuff to Beckett because I appreciate Beckett on higher end stuff personally.
Mhm.
So I'm excited to see where that's going. I mean, I know you've done a pretty large CGC submission. Um,
I do.
what
I've got stacks of it just hanging around all over the place, cards everywhere that I'm
Mhm.
currently processing in and filtering in. So, and I've got talked about first ed base. Well, I'm
Wow,
money's where my mouth is. I've got stuff to
wow,
send off to, yeah. So, um,
playing the
but
ungraded cards there. That's
yeah, well,
the
they'll be graded soon. Yeah. So, grading is awesome right now. I think as a whole, the industry is really transitioning, more towards the collectible focus. I think collectors have always been in the market, and I think a lot of what Pokemon has done over the years has catered to collectors. But there was always, some focus on the competitive aspect, some focus on, just, I wouldn't even say the flippers. I don't think they really focus on the flippers, but you do need them for your
Mhm,
market to sustain and thrive.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, I think grading is really just pushing us into that echelon of long term, Pokemon's going to be around, and, a lot of people are going to prefer to have their cards graded. And, it's, it's one of those situations where right now we're almost, I wouldn't, it's weird to say like in the early phases of grading, because grading in Pokemon's been around, for a long time. But we're starting, we've seen more competitors enter the grading market for Pokemon and Magic in the last, couple years than what we have seen in the whole rest of the hobby combined.
right.
And a lot of that is where the money goes, people follow. And so these companies, they want to get in on it. And, we saw CGC enter the scene that has done, coin stamps, comics, that kind of thing. There's GMA, there's all these companies entering the scene that grade these cards now. And I think we're getting into that situation where grading as a whole is propelling. Right now the whole idea of you can just grade anything and it just makes money, just doubles overnight. One, I don't think that lasts forever,
Mhm,
FYI. But I think we're just in this situation now where everybody's starting to get their feet wet, maybe that didn't before. And so we're really still fleshing out what grading means to this hobby, what the numbers themselves mean, what the grading scales mean. I think a lot of people out there, myself included, still struggle in some regards to grade and assess cards. I can look at a card one day and say, man, I think it's this, but then I'll look at it compared to a bunch of others I got and say, well, now I don't think it's that.
right.
And I think, I think a lot of people think I'm like becoming the CGC shill, right? And I the reason I like to discuss them and bring them up is because I think one of the greatest things they are doing for our hobby, all grading aside, is they're really getting our community to start looking at the grades. It's like the grades themselves, the companies themselves, what our expectations are for grading, what our expectations of these companies are. What are we paying for?
Mhm,
And it, it it's really starting the dialogue. I think for the longest time, I don't think, most people would contest that it was PSA's king in Pokemon. And, BGS was king in Magic. And now we're getting into this situation, with the Hidden Fate Shiny Zard, where the black label went absolutely through the roof, broke 5 digits. That shocked a lot of people. For a while we heard, well, this is crazy. It's never going to hold. It dipped way back. Now they're starting to recover again. People really valued that black label, the subgrades, the perfect nature of that card, which at the time was unheard of. It was PSA 10 or bust before that.
right.
And you've had people like Pawn Stars Gary, who has the two BGS pristine Charizards that has really kind of helped put that on the map, that there may be a tier above PSA 10. And for the longest time, I think everyone just got really comfortable with, what it says is what it is, and that's how it is. And now that we're starting to see more competition flow into the market, we're starting to really get into these nuances of, you know, how hard does a corner hurt a card, or how hard should this hurt a card or not hurt a card, how valuable is computer technology and grading and things like that versus not having it before. And those kind of things, we hear all these different arguments, 2 certs versus 4 certs, or you know should you grade error cards or not grade error cards, do things need a provenance to be graded or not, like that kind of stuff. And I think the more competition we get in this market, the more that gets fleshed out,
Hmm.
and the more not only people are spending their money, understand what they're spending it on, but I think at the end of the day, it gets the consumer the best product, and that's why I'm so excited about it.
And
Because
it's a real argument to have. I mean,
Mhm,
there has been a lack and a shift in the parameters of grading over time, and
mhm,
value affects these things.
yeah,
And the people that are invested in this stuff early on are, I see them against it, and understandably. But yeah, there's that mindset of a 9 and a 10, strong 9, strong 10, weak 9, whatever. And
mhm,
it's real. It's a
yeah,
real thing. You can't, I mean, that's why StockX is not popular now, or not
mhm,
taking off, because they don't have real pictures of the cards you're getting. So
mhm,
people are not comfortable buying a 9 or a 10 or
yeah,
9.5, whatever. It's a real thing. I'm not comfortable doing it.
yeah,
And that's a reason why I started sending my higher end cards to Beckett. I mean, like
mhm,
there's only 2 Trophy Kangaskhan's graded by Beckett. Only
mhm,
2. Mine's the highest graded Beckett out there. And understanding why it got what grades to me calms me so much better. It's like I think I paid up to get this card graded, insured it correctly, and I
mhm,
like to believe they spent the time on it. But this is one of the most fairly graded cards I've ever seen. Just looking at
mhm,
it, comparing it to other similar old back Japanese cards and their grades
mhm,
between PSA and Beckett. Um, and so I really appreciate that there is a competitive nature now, much bigger competitive market
mhm,
of grading companies, and
mhm,
the way they're handling their processes, and the fact
yeah,
that they are different. I
mhm,
think it's great because they'll start learning from each other.
yes,
And yeah, it's really important to have that fairness and equality of grades.
mhm,
So I'm happy to see it as well. And I don't like all the the talking about the little things like CGC's label, and does a black label really matter? Because it's arbitrary to each person. It's
yeah, and I think that's a great point to make. Is a lot of grading is an eye of the beholder,
Mhm.
and that's why you can't just use computers on everything. I've heard Charlie in a interview make that comment. Charlie Herlocker,
Yeah.
that it there are, like, there's certain reasons that you can't just blanket use a computer for everything, because like a giant scratch on the front of a card may impact somebody a lot differently than a giant scratch on the back, in terms of aesthetic and how much they like or dislike a card. And I think we're just kind of in that mode where people are really figuring that out and what they do value. And it's like you said, the more competition, the more, all of this gets started, the more happy consumers get with their cards. You look at that Trophy Kang and you feel good about it. You feel that it is an accurate assessment. Whether somebody else feels that is completely irrelevant, unless they're the ones, buying it from you or something, if you're
Hmm.
selling it. And so I think that's another thing that people are maybe losing sight of, is that we are right now in a phase where it is a lot of dollars and cents and numbers and getting caught up in that. But at the end of the day, some people just grade cards because they like them. I really enjoy. I've got one here actually. It's a Scizor graded by CGC, and it's a perfect 10. And I like that my card says perfect on it. I think that's exciting.
Yeah.
And to me, it's the same reason a lot of people like the black label with BGS, is because the label is black. It stands out. It gives off that aesthetic of something that's superior. It's the same thing I was talking about with the Champions Path
Hmm.
ETBs. It gives off that aesthetic that people like. And there's a lot of PSA 10s out there, right?
Hmm.
And so for me, a PSA 10 is like, it's cool, it's awesome. I love to have PSA 10s, but when my card can say perfect 10 on it, and that perfect 10 is better than a pristine 10, and you start to get into these nuances. And I also like subgrades. I like removing as much of that ambiguity as
Hmm.
possible. I think that was one of the things people slept on with BGS for the longest time, is that you can get subgrades. Now, obviously subgrades only matter if your grading scale is accurate, but I do think the more you can try to remove ambiguity, and I think subgrades almost hold the graders accountable, right? Versus, oh, okay, that's an 8. Now they actually have to break down why a card is an 8
Mhm.
and things like that. And I think that there's a lot of value to that. And so I think we're just in that phase where people are figuring out where the value lies and what it lies in. And, it's like you said, people will complain about the label or the case or the whatever with any of these companies or what they do and don't like. The market will flesh all of that out. And
Mhm.
one of the points I want to make is actually I have 2 games here.
Oh, I
And so
completely forgot about this. Yeah.
yes, this is a reference that I make to a lot of people. So there's 2 companies here. This one's VGA and this one is WADA.
Mhm.
VGA has graded games for a long, long time. Um, WADA has graded games since I think it was late 2017, early 2018, somewhere in that era, but it hasn't been that long. And the market heard the exact same things at the time. They're never going to be able to take market share, or I don't like the cases, or I don't like how they do this, or I don't like they use the point 0.2 system, so like 9, 9.2, 9.4, etc. We heard a lot of these same critiques. And the reality is WADA owns the market now. They made great partnerships with, auction houses like Heritage. They, graded, things that maybe in the past had issues with, such as like prototypes or reseals on games and things like that. And they really like they do complete in box, which is something that VGA won't touch. They just don't specialize in that. So they came in, they found a niche of like, oh, we can do complete in box and things like that. But they also then said, we'll do that well, but we'll also do this well, and people will get pulled in from here and expand out. And so that's why I'm not quick to just write a company off. I mean, we've heard for years people have all of these complaints and qualms. They want all these things fixed, but then companies come on the scene and try to do it and nobody wants to give them a chance.
Mhm.
And I think that's kind of crazy. I think you have to give a company a chance. And that, I know that we are talking with cards a lot of dollars. So it doesn't mean you have to throw all your money at the wall. But, you know, I heard so many critiques on case and label, but people don't even have them in hand. It's things like that. And, everyone has their biases and reasons they say what they say. But I think the biggest thing is just the market's going to play itself out. This is why I've kind of become more reserved. I'll still post videos or whatever talking about, my graded card returns or maybe my prices I'm seeing and that kind of thing. But I'm less on the forums, keyboard warring against every single person that's got a problem with, CGC just because I believe in them. They don't need to believe in it.
Right.
Because eventually I'm a firm believer the market will work itself out. And over time, you know, people will figure out what's important to them. Are fast turnaround times important to you? Is, a cheaper grading cost important to you? Is an accurate scale important to you? Even if that means your cards maybe don't always get the 9 and 10 you think they're going to get, and as those things eventually do play out, the market will decide for itself, and
Mhm.
maybe I'll be in the minority. Maybe CGC will just always, be, kind of the third rung on the ladder, and then BGS and then PSA, because that's just how it is. And that's what the market wants. And, I'm just a firm believer that a lot of that arguing and stuff, just it's not really worth your time. A lot of it is just we'll watch it play out. All those people that argued against WADA for years, I don't know where they are now,
Yeah.
and the market played itself out. And so I just wouldn't engage with it. I just,
Yeah. No, yeah,
let things happen. And
the most important factor for me is that they were willing and able to bring Charlie Herlocker into their world. And I mean, I don't know anything about behind the scenes of how they did that, what's going on, but having an
Mhm.
expert like that is huge for the hobby, for
Mhm.
collectibles. And um, I know that we we actually bought a similar item recently, vending series,
Yes.
and
Yes.
I was talking to you a little bit about it, what I wanted to do with grading and all that, and I
Mm.
actually reached out to Charlie and asked him what kind of knowledge do they have on this, because I remember seeing a video not too long ago from SM Pratt about his vending series cards getting back from PSA being graded very harshly due
Mm.
to they got a common lip on their
Mm.
edges when
Yeah, when
when
you
you peel
peel
them.
that.
And I contacted Charlie and said, "Hey, I just got this. I'm considering doing a pretty mass grading, potentially with a whole box. What does your team know at CGC about these things?" And he said, "I've had I've had these guys look at the cards, peel some themselves, and experience what they look like,
Mhm.
at firsthand. And the fact that he's educating this grading team on these types of items, I think, is extremely valuable. So
Mhm.
just that short conversation I had with him convinced me that I want to send these cards to the
Mhm.
right company. And
Yeah.
CGC for these cards makes sense because if they understand that, they're going to grade them properly, and I'm going to get my best value out of them that way.
Mhm. And I think there's two like really great points in there. I think the first one is you said, I want to send these cards to this company because they're going to do well. And I think that's something else. I think people almost think they have to just grade with one company and that's the only company they can ever grade with. And I
Mm-hmm.
understand, wanting matching sets or whatever and slabs, but like you're not as a consumer forced to only grade with one company. You can grade with all three, or
Mm-hmm.
all eight of them. I don't even know how many there are now. And you can send cards where you think, either financially they'll do the best or, collection wise they'll do the best. I know some people are really the blue label, they're getting into sending water Pokemon because they match the
Oh,
blue label.
yeah.
And one of the first cards I got back from CGC was a Kyogre EX from the EX era. And I
Mm-hmm.
was like, this with the blue label, I was like, man, I almost wish they would just color code the label to the Pokemon.
That's what
Like that would
someone said about this
yeah,
because it got the silver label with like a silver. Yeah, it just looks
yeah, with
nice.
it, like
It's
yeah, that color
I'm
of the
I'm
Pokemon.
kind of
And like
glad it didn't get a 9.5 to get the gold label. It wouldn't. Yeah,
kind of.
kind of.
But
Yeah.
yeah, and I think the other big point there is the acquisition of Charlie, bringing Charlie in as a consultant. I think that's huge because to me, more than anything, and Charlie's one of the absolute most knowledgeable people, I know in the industry. It to me it screams they truly do want to do better.
Hmm.
And time will tell on how much that holds true or whether that holds true long term or, if they get market share and then they start to lapse or whatever. But from what I've seen so far between moves like that and their communication on social media and responses to errors, because things do happen, mistakes do happen when you're doing a very high volume business. It doesn't matter how much you iron out your processes, there will be human error. Their responses to those errors, things like that, that's the kind of stuff to me that screams, we really do want to be the company that you guys want us to be. And I think it's only fair as a consumer to then give that company a chance to do that if that's the foot they're putting forward. Now, can they maintain that? Can they continue to do that over time? And if the answer is yes, I think the market accepts that and really starts to gravitate in that direction. If the answer is no, or they start to get lax, or the errors continue, or things like that, then I think the market just goes right back to what they were comfortable with. And I
Hmm.
think that's one of those, it'll take time to see it all play out. But yeah, so far I have been very impressed. And yeah, the first thing, seeing Charlie as a part of it, was huge to me. That told me that they did their research, they knew and found someone within the community that really could champion a lot of the interest that the hardcore collectors and investors and flippers and everyone wanted. And that they came out the gates and said, look, we want to be the company that you guys have wanted. And whether they can fulfill that long term or not, only time will tell. But so far I'm pretty excited about
Awesome. Well, we're coming in at like almost 2 hours here.
it. I
Um,
told you I'm a talker, so
yeah, no, I mean, I would love to do this all day long,
yeah.
but I kind of want to save some of this stuff for another podcast in the future with you. I mean,
Okay.
touching base on more of the video game stuff, and maybe if we wait a little bit, we can kind of look at our thoughts on Champions Path and what's happening there. So,
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
I think we're gonna cut the podcast here so we can get on with our days. I know you're busy and
Mhm.
we got some things to take care of, and I'm sure I'll see you in Discord while we're taking care of all that stuff. But I want to thank you again for your time today. It's very valuable. Again,
Absolutely.
this is a little bit of selfishness for me because I'm trying to pick your brain on this stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing what happens with Champions Path and how
Mhm.
well the community does. But just give you a little quick shout out again. Check out this guy's Instagram, Squeaks Game World. His website, squeaksgameworld.com. He's on eBay as well, the same name. He's got some great product, great items, everything CGC, PSA, sealed stuff. Even unique. I was looking at you got banners and posters from
Mhm.
old tournaments and whatnot. You got some really cool stuff. So
Thanks.
very knowledgeable, very motivated, and yeah, I'll be paying attention still of what you got to say, what you have to say in Discord. So looking
And
forward
I
to
just
that.
want to say congrats to you for taking the big leap.
Oh, thank you.
It's no small task, as I'm sure you're realizing, but
Yeah.
I have no doubt you will navigate it well. And I will be more than happy to come and have coffee with you anytime.
Great, I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll meet up in person here soon
Awesome.
since we're so close. So all right, thanks again, and
Have a great day.
yeah, everybody, thanks for watching. Thanks for the support. Hit that subscribe button. I'm supposed to say that now. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this, and we'll see you next week.